Stay away from the graduation, okay? If a dull woman like you shows up, you'll be the laughingstock of everyone. It's my moment to shine. Don't you dare come. I felt dizzy at Renly's words about becoming the laughingstock of everyone. It was clear now Renly didn't consider me family. To Renly, I was just an embarrassment. Hey, where are you right now? The moment I pressed the call button, Renly's grating voice pierced my ears. Renly's tone was fast, laced with panic. It seemed she was in a state of panic. Leaving a note like that? Do you think it's okay? Where are you? Come back right now. I could also hear Oliver's voice. Both of them were frantically worried. My name is Evelyn, a 39-year-old housewife. While working part-time in a local real estate office, I've been taking care of our daughter Renly and managing the household chores for over a decade. I married Oliver 12 years ago. Oliver had a daughter, Renly, from his previous marriage. I met Oliver at the workplace where I worked before we got married. At that time, I was working at a construction company, and Oliver used to come there for sales. Our company was strict with its clients, but I was always impressed by Oliver, who came to sell with a smile. I once recommended Oliver's products to my company. I wanted to be of help to Oliver. As a result, Oliver's company was chosen. That led to us going out for meals several times, getting into a serious relationship, and him proposing. I happily accepted his proposal and started preparing for the wedding after resigning from my job. When the wedding was just around the corner, Oliver revealed that he was living alone with his 6-year-old daughter. At first, I thought it was a lie. It wasn't something I could believe immediately, but the story was true. I met Renly a week before the wedding. Renly, perhaps shy, hid behind Oliver and didn't come out in front of me. That's when I made up my mind. For Renly, let's live together. I decided to make Renly a respectable adult. Until high school graduation, I'll properly take care of Renly. I didn't fully understand why I thought so, but I couldn't forget the anxious look peeking out from under Renly. Having made up my mind, I decided to marry Oliver. It was my first marriage, and my family, especially my father, Anthony, strongly opposed it, calling it foolish and nonsensical. Despite their objections, I went ahead with the marriage. If only I had listened to my parents then, I might have avoided the ordeal that was about to begin. Now, 12 years into this marriage, Renly has turned 18. She's about to graduate from high school this year. It should be a moment of joy, but I couldn't bring myself to feel happy. The thought I had when I decided to marry, to raise her to be a respectable adult, kept crossing my mind. Hey, where's my t-shirt? Where did you put it? Don't tell me you stole it. Just 2 years after we started living together, Renly began to treat me harshly. She used to be kind in the beginning. Even though she was getting used to me, one day she started hurling abuse and became rough in her behavior. Is this the t-shirt you're looking for? I pulled it out from the laundry I was folding and handed it to Renly. Why did you wash this? What if it shrinks? You're supposed to dry clean it, aren't you? You're so clueless. Seriously, so clumsy. I had hand washed and air dried the t-shirt, thinking the fabric might get damaged at the dry cleaners. But I couldn't say that to Renly, and all I could respond with was, I'm sorry. Renly snatched it from my hands, and leaving behind a cutting remark, You're really useless. She walked away. Her words were sharp, piercing through my heart. I couldn't retort, only bowing my head. I couldn't understand why Renly had become so rough towards me. Initially, I thought she was being teased about her father's remarriage, but it seemed that wasn't the case. Around the same time, Oliver's attitude began to change. He used to be as smiley as when he was doing sales, but recently he stopped smiling at home and often seemed grumpy. And he started being harsh towards me. As if mirroring Oliver's behavior, Renly's attitude towards me also changed. I thought maybe I was lacking in some way, so I made sure not to slack off with the household chores and kept a close watch on Renly. I wanted her to grow up to be a respectable adult. But contrary to my wishes, Renly's attitude only got worse day by day. She stopped saying thank you to me. What was strange was during parent-teacher meetings in elementary school, the teachers said Renly's behavior in class was normal, and she wasn't rough at all. Oliver, too, seemed to talk to Renly normally. Sometimes he even showed a smile. So it seemed that this terrible attitude was reserved only for me. And that realization hurt me even more. I couldn't even discuss it with Oliver. He had become distant and a completely different person from before. I had no one to turn to. With a heavy and dark weight in my heart, I continued with my life, becoming increasingly isolated within my home. My isolation in the house only got worse. After middle school, Renly stopped sharing anything about school with me, and Oliver was the only one attending all the events. I would find out about sports days and cultural festivals from the neighbors. Oliver and Renly seemed to be getting along well, often going out together. I, too, wanted to be treated as family by Oliver and Renly. I had always hoped we would live together happily. But the reality that this wish would never be fulfilled was unbearably painful. And Oliver's behavior towards me kept growing worse.
Dust is piling up on the stairs. Clean it up. You're the housewife, aren't you? We're running low on toilet paper. Are you even cleaning the bathroom? And you're really clumsy.
I would often receive such remarks from Oliver. Initially, when we got married, he shared household chores. Oliver, who had been living with Renly, used to do housework. He was initially happy that we could share the household chores, but now I was the one doing all the work. Even though Oliver used to say it was absurd for the housewife to do all the chores. Though Renly was an easy child, it somehow worked against me, making me feel inadequate and depressed. When I tried discussing it with Oliver, he would dismiss it, saying,
"You're not trying hard enough."
It was always somehow my fault. So the more I tried to discuss it with Oliver, the heavier the gloom in my heart became. He would nitpick on my household mishaps, nagging and blaming me.
You can't even clean properly. Haven't you learned anything after all these years? Do you lack the ability to learn?
Oliver would look down on me with disdain. All I could do was apologize. I'm sorry, I'll try harder. Please forgive me. Oliver would sigh exaggeratedly, as if it was all too much.
Trying hard doesn't mean you can do it. That's why you're always getting scolded. You always say you'll do it, but have you ever actually accomplished anything?
Oliver's words kept chipping away at my heart. As time passed, my heart grew weary, and Renly turned 18. I was curious about Renly's future plans, but she wouldn't tell me, and Oliver wouldn't talk about it either. By this time, I had stopped talking to Oliver and Renly about anything, but absolutely necessary matters. I happened to overhear Renly and Oliver talking about our future plans after graduation. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I wanted to know, so I stopped and listened until the end. It's settled. I got into college with a recommendation, and I even got a scholarship. It's all thanks to you, Dad. Thank you. Renly's happy voice was something she would never use with me.
That's great. It's all the result of your hard work. All those chores we dumped on that clumsy housekeeper paid off.
I couldn't believe it. Was the housekeeper they were referring to me? Yeah, it was a good outlet for my stress. Their scornful laughter reached my ears. I quietly left the spot and locked myself in the bathroom. It was the only place I could be alone. Crouched in the bathroom, I held my head and let the tears flow. To be thought of in such a way by Oliver and Renly. I had endured the last 10 years. No matter how close my heart came to breaking, I continued being Renly's mother and Oliver's wife. Even when my heart screamed out in agony and felt at its limit, I somehow managed to persevere. There were times I felt I couldn't get up, but I forced myself to, preparing lunches, making breakfast, and managing household chores like laundry and cleaning. Truth be told, I wanted to just lie down and never get up. But if I did that, I feared I would never be needed by Oliver and Renly again. That fear kept me going. I spent my days in exhaustion. Honestly, I barely remember that time. One day after going shopping, a neighbor told me something shocking. Tomorrow was Renly's high school graduation. Unable to admit I didn't know, I just smiled vaguely and left. As soon as I got home, I collapsed onto the sofa. I had always thought of raising Renly to be a respectable adult. High school graduation was supposed to be a milestone in that process. Yet again, I was the one left out. In this house, I was forbidden from having a mobile phone or using a computer. All I had was an old cell phone that could only make calls. All communication with the school was handled by Oliver, so I didn't even have what you'd call mom friends. I had absolutely no way to get information about the school. Still, I learned about sports days and concerts from neighbors or children's conversations after school, and secretly attended. I wanted to properly attend the high school graduation and celebrate Renly's transition into adulthood. While I was crying on the sofa, Renly returned from school. "What are you doing slumped there? It's so dark. You're making the whole house gloomy. Can't you do something about it?" Renly glared at me, even though it was Renly's fault. If Renly had told me the date of her graduation, I wouldn't feel like this. For the first time, I felt anger slowly rising from the depths of my heart. "So, I hear your graduation is tomorrow. You didn't bother to tell me, though." I was about to say this, lacing my words with a sense of blame. Renly seemed suddenly taken aback to my defiant words, but then she exaggeratedly sighed, as if to cover it up. "So what? You're not coming to the graduation anyway, so why does the date matter?" I responded to Renly's words by tilting my head in feigned confusion. I never said I wasn't going to the graduation. "Don't come. If a drab woman like you shows up, you'll be the laughingstock of everyone. It's my moment to shine. Don't you dare come." I felt dizzy at Renly's words about becoming the laughingstock of everyone. Indeed, Renly didn't consider me family. To Renly, I was just an embarrassment. I had hoped this time would be different, but it seems forgiveness was out of reach. Renly's words "don't come" pierced my heart. It was clear that from her own mouth that I was nothing but an intruder. That night, Oliver came home holding a suit and a dry cleaner's bag. He had taken the suit to the cleaners himself without asking me. It was obvious he knew about Renly's graduation ceremony. When I looked at the suit,
"Yeah, I guess Renly didn't tell you."
Oliver said it with a mocking, pitying look. It was confirmed I was the least needed in this house. I was the only one who thought of us as a family. At that moment, I realized my heart had already surpassed its limit. So I decided to end my role in this family. The next day, Oliver and Renly went to the graduation ceremony together. I was left behind. And
"We'll eat out tonight, so no need to prepare dinner,"
Oliver even said. I wasn't invited. The old me might have forgiven even this treatment, but those days were over today. I decided to leave the house last night. Once they left, I quickly packed my bags, left a note, and left the house. I could no longer be a family with Oliver and Renly. I decided to seek refuge at my parents' house, about 2 hours away by train. There, I would start the process of cutting ties with Oliver and Renly. The note I left stated my intention to sever our family ties, live alone, and that detailed discussions should be made through a lawyer. Although I hadn't found a lawyer yet, I knew Anthony could recommend one. My family home belongs to a lineage of landowners and is well known in the area. Anthony, owning considerable real estate, was a well-known figure. He surely had lawyers in his social circle. I remembered meeting a lawyer during a New Year's Eve greeting at my family home. Another task was selling the house where Oliver and Renly were living. That house, on land owned by Anthony, was built with money he gave as a wedding gift. I had been slowly repaying Anthony with the money I earned from my real estate part-time job, which was also through Anthony's referral. The house, both the building and the land, belonged to Anthony. It was in his name. At the time, Oliver, perhaps thinking the house was a gift, never inquired about the ownership. Probably he was afraid to upset Anthony and lose the gift. Oliver always tried to appear superior in front of those close to him, acting tough towards those he deemed below him, while ingratiating himself with those above. I recounted all this to Anthony, tears streaming down my face. I sobbed uncontrollably, pausing my story many times, but Anthony listened till the end. Tears welled up in his eyes too. What made me happy was that Anthony didn't criticize my decision back then. He simply said,
"You've had a hard time."
Then, Anthony made several phone calls, and lawyers and real estate agents started coming to the house. Everything happened quickly after that. It was decided that the house would be demolished. The demolition was scheduled for a week later. The note said, "Please leave within a week." Anthony remarked sarcastically,
"That's quite generous of you."
I just didn't want them to complain later. A week passed as I consulted with the lawyer about the divorce. I shared everything with my mother, Zayla, and we cried together. One moment, Zayla's face turned frighteningly stern, a look I still can't forget. I discussed my future plans with Anthony. Above all, I needed to establish a stable life foundation. It took courage to talk to my parents, and though it was painful, speaking up lightened my heart, allowing me to sleep soundly for the first time in 10 years. A week later, living relatively peacefully at my parents' home, my mobile phone rang. As expected, it was Renly. To be honest, I didn't want to talk. The memories of our past treatment darkened my heart. I decided to ignore the call. However, the calls persisted, increasingly from Oliver as well. They were probably contacting me about the note I left. Maybe they had been informed by the demolition company. Oliver and Renly for 10 years subjected me to verbal abuse and exploitation, an unacceptable treatment for a family. The thought of dealing with them again made me shudder. But I couldn't continue like this. I needed to settle the past properly to move forward. Plus, running away without facing them wouldn't give me closure. After enduring their appalling treatment, it was time for Oliver and Renly to get their due. I braced myself and answered the phone. "Hey, where are you right now?" As soon as I pressed the talk button, Renly's irritating voice pierced my ears. Her tone was rapid, clearly panicked.
"Leaving such a ridiculous note. You think you'll get away with this? Where are you?"
"Come back right now." Oliver's voice was also audible. Both were in a frenzy. I imagined Renly returning from the graduation ceremony, returning to find that their stress relief servant had vanished, and a note demanding divorce and evacuation of the house. Anyone would panic, especially on the day of her graduation. I couldn't help but let out a smile at Renly's desperation. Who is this?" Renly stuttered at my unexpected response. I hung up the phone. Then, I called the property management company to confirm the demolition date. It was scheduled for tomorrow as planned, and Oliver had been informed. I requested the demolition be posted by a day and asked them to inform Oliver about the delay. A day of grace was given. Oliver would probably come here. That's when I would deliver my retribution to Oliver and Renly. Despite dozens of calls from them, I ignored them all. The next day around noon, I heard the entrance doorbell ring and the sound of knocking. Ding dong! It must be Oliver and Renly. They probably wanted to come earlier, but bad connections could make the journey immensely long. They seemed breathless, undoubtedly in a hurry. I had arranged with Anthony and Zayla to stay in a separate room, so it appeared I was the only one at home. I led Oliver and Renly to the living room. Oliver entered timidly. He was always uncomfortable around my father, Anthony. Anthony, a well-known and respected figure in town, certainly had a presence. To Oliver, he was someone superior. Renly, on the other hand, wasn't intimidated. She seemed determined to overpower me and take me back. Renly lounged in the living room chair, crossing her legs. She silently gestured for me to sit opposite her while crossing her arms. I leisurely prepared coffee, taking my time before sitting across from her. Renly, seeming impatient, addressed me. "What's the meaning of this?" Oliver, sitting beside her, placed my note on the table. I stared at Renly silently without reacting. Renly averted her eyes, trying to dispel the awkwardness with a laugh. "What was that? Who is this? Yesterday? Your acting was pretty bad." I continued to silently gaze at Renly. She squirmed under my stare, continuing uncomfortably. "Look, it's useless. You can't make it without us. You're nothing but trash." I almost reacted to Renly's harsh words, but restrained myself, noticing the tremor in her voice. She must be putting up a strong front. Throughout this, Oliver remained silent, seemingly watching how things would unfold. "Stop being stubborn and come back." Renly was trying to disorient and drag me back home with her vile words. The more agitated Renly became, the calmer I responded. "I don't have a family, do I? Well, I have parents, but you two are not my family, right?" Renly, probably feeling cornered, raised her voice. "What are you talking about? Dad and I are your family, right, Dad?" Renly, sensing she was at a disadvantage alone, started seeking Oliver's support. Oliver looked around, ensuring no one else was present, and then spoke to me with a sense of relief.
"That's right, you can't live without us, just like Renly said, so you're coming back."
Oliver suddenly became assertive, realizing my parents were not around. Looking back, I marvel at his lack of courage. "Therefore, I have no family," I answered firmly. No matter what Oliver and Renly said, I would continue to treat them as strangers. They were not my family. If they were, they wouldn't have treated me like a slave. A family supports and helps each other, standing by one another in times of trouble. But Oliver and Renly were different. For a decade, they treated me as a servant, a vent for their stress. They insisted it was normal, oblivious to how wrong and atrocious it was. Unaware, they oppressed me. I'm impressed I endured it for 10 years. I commend myself. It all started with the look in Renly's eyes when I first met her. Bound by the words I imposed on myself to raise Renly into a respectable adult. For this, I tirelessly served Oliver and Renly. That's why I endured until high school graduation. I decided that once Renly graduated high school and became independent, it would be time to draw the line with her and Oliver. Until then, I harbored a faint hope that Oliver and Renly might have a change of heart and treat me differently, and if so, I was willing to continue as a family. But of course, Oliver and Renly shattered my expectations, leading to this situation. Everything was decided by their behavior the day before the graduation. That's why I'm now confronting them with the appropriate attitude. Oliver and Renly are no longer my family. That's why I won't treat them as such. Perhaps realizing the significance of my treating them as strangers, Renly shifted her approach. "We're family, right, Mom? Stop with the unconvincing act. She suddenly started calling me Mom.
It seems Renly has begun to realize things won't be as they were. Oliver, too, watched nervously as Renly and I interacted.
You're not my birth mother, but we've lived together for a long time, so please listen to my request.
Renly unfolded her arms and clasped her hands together in front of her, leaning forward from her previously arrogant posture. I don't recall owing a favor to someone who's not family. I responded coldly, suppressing my emotions. Tears appeared in Renly's eyes. She pleaded with a desperate look.
Please listen to me. That note you left was a lie, right? You're not really selling the house, are you? That can't be true, because you're part of our family.
The way Renly referred to me as Mom was nauseating. And what concerned her was the house. She was anxious about losing the house. Though it's true the house will be gone. Is that really what concerns her? It seems that for her, having a place to live is all that matters, regardless of my presence. No matter how much Renly begs, my mind won't change. Renly finally bowed her head, apparently crying. What kind of joke is this? Stop with the insolent attitude now. Perhaps rattled by Renly's tears, Oliver directed aggressive words at me. What's this note about? Come back and stop the demolition now. Oliver, driven by anger, spoke rapidly. That's not possible. It's already decided. I continued to respond with suppressed emotion. You think you can do this to your family and get away with it? That's why I keep saying you're not my family. Neither Oliver nor Renly seems to listen at all. Please stop. Haven't I made it clear? You're not my family. How many times do I have to repeat the same words? Suddenly, Oliver stood up and slammed his fist on the table. Stop messing around! I was so startled, but managed to suppress any reaction. Who's really messing around? After not treating me as family for 10 years, you can't just expect me to act like one now, can you? I spoke more sharply than intended. Anger was welling up inside me. It wasn't visible in my actions, but the rage from deep within was threatening to erupt. I couldn't tolerate Oliver and Renly's selfish actions. They trampled on my decade of hellish suffering and my efforts to overcome it. I had tried to become a family with Oliver and Renly, but they rejected it, mocked it, and exploited it. They will never understand how lonely and painful it was to be ostracized. Despite my repeated wishes to be treated as family, my hopes were never realized. It took me 10 years to give up. Despite my continued efforts to build a relationship with Renly as her mother, it all led to this result. A self-deprecating smile crossed my face. And seeing my dry smile, Oliver and Renly stared at me in shock. Oliver seemed to lose his strength and slumped into his chair. These two, instead of understanding my feelings, tried to use me until the very end. No matter how much I cared for Oliver and Renly, they never cared for me. Even though I valued them, they never valued me. And now, finding themselves in a tight spot, they resorted to using me again, spouting family bonds they never believed in. It was all too convenient. I felt not just a headache, but nausea. Why did I tolerate them for 10 years? Looking back, it's a mystery. But dwelling on it now is pointless. There's no future for me, Oliver and Renly together. All I can do is make Oliver and Renly acknowledge their wrongdoings and pay for them. I expect and trust nothing from Renly or Oliver anymore. Oliver stood up, knelt on the floor, and bowed his head. I'm sorry. Please come back. I beg you. Even with his head bowed, it made no impact on me. I won't extend a helping hand or consider living together again. Enough already. I'm no longer your family. I'm a stranger to you. Renly, following Oliver's lead, started apologizing deeply.
I'm sorry. Please forgive us. We're family, so I want to go back together.
Their arbitrary statements left me dumbfounded. After treating me like a stranger for 10 years, you now say, come back because we're family. Did you really think I'd say yes? You're taking me too lightly.
I felt I was losing my calm composure. Carried by momentum, words just spilled out of me. Words I would never have said before began to spill out. Harsh words I had kept to myself out of consideration for Oliver and Renly. I don't want to hear your excuses. I can't trust any of your words. I can never think of us as family again. I placed a document in front of Oliver. It was the divorce papers, already signed by me. Fill out the divorce papers now. I'll take them myself. Write them right here. Oliver shook his head in denial, then showed me a smile.
Think it over, all right?
I was astonished by his persistence. Such a cowardly man. I had always misinterpreted Oliver's ingratiating smile. The smile he showed when we first met was a sly expression he used when assessing someone, and I had mistaken it for kindness. The thought still infuriates me. I stood up and called for Anthony and Zayla from the back. Anthony and Zayla appeared in the living room. Oliver opened his mouth wide in shock.
Anthony.
Anthony glared sharply at Oliver. Zayla also had a stern look on her face. Just being glared at, Oliver cowered.
I'm terribly sorry.
Oliver bowed deeply, making Renly bow as well.
We're sorry for the trouble Evelyn's mishap has caused Anthony and Zayla.
I thought I had misheard. My mishap? Is Oliver still trying to shift all the blame even now? Anthony looked perplexed, but remained silent.
Evelyn just left home on her own. We were only trying to persuade her to come back. Isn't that right, Renly?
Oliver was pressuring Renly to agree with his fabricated story.
Evelyn's misbehavior. Don't joke with me.
Anthony's booming voice echoed throughout the house. Oliver and Renly barely uttered a word, intimidated. Anthony stood in front of Oliver, leaned down to meet his gaze.
How can you interpret Evelyn's actions as selfish? You only think about yourself. You're truly a pitiful man.
Then Anthony turned to Renly.
You two, following this man, have done some terrible things. What did you think of Evelyn, you foolish girl?
Again, Anthony's loud voice reverberated. Renly was visibly trembling, probably out of fear. Anthony stood up and glared at them menacingly.
Renly, you've been causing trouble at school, too. I've been informed.
Indeed, through a detective acquaintance of Anthony, it was discovered that Renly had been extorting money from a fellow female student at school. The victimized student, too scared to confide in anyone, was now under Anthony's support, preparing for a criminal complaint. Renly, who looked down on me, was doing the same at school. Renly exclaimed, "Lies!" and widened her eyes. "Did that person rat on me?" It seemed I was witnessing Renly's true nature. Absolutely no remorse. She's only thinking about getting out of this situation.
And you, Oliver, you've been embezzling company funds.
This was also uncovered by the detective's investigation. Oliver had been fabricating business trips. I had hired the detective to bolster my divorce case, but they unearthed some shocking facts about the two.
Why? How could you know that? Was it that person?
Oliver reacted just like Renly. No remorse, too stubborn. Punishment from me alone won't suffice. They must face societal repercussions too. Zayla then spoke up. "Well, this conversation is over. Please sign the divorce papers and leave this house as soon as possible." Oliver, while shedding tears, muttered,
I don't want to,
but seemed to resign himself after Anthony forced a pen into his hand. He sat down and signed the divorce papers. I glanced at the clock. It was almost 7 p.m. The last train was at 7:30 p.m. Missing it meant no trains until the next morning. In a small town like this, there are no taxis. If Oliver and Renly miss the last train, they won't make it in time for the demolition tomorrow. They probably didn't pack anything, thinking they could persuade me. As I was pondering whether to inform them, Renly suddenly adopted a defiant attitude and said something unbelievable. "But you initiated this divorce. Dad, you should get alimony from the divorce court." Had Renly become defiant after being exposed? Anthony and Zayla looked shocked. It's impossible. What you've done is essentially domestic violence. A crime. Renly, momentarily taken aback, but still defiant. Prove it then, she retorted. I placed a journal on the table. This is the diary I started writing since I got married. Renly glared at me with disdain. How could you have any proof without a mobile phone or computer? You seem unaware that a diary can be significant evidence. Evidence isn't limited to videos, audio, or photos. Renly was visibly stunned. That's right. Even the lawyers acknowledged it. This diary is substantial evidence. Oliver and Renly seemed resigned, their heads drooping. I exaggeratedly checked my watch. The last train is left. You won't be able to return home today. Zayla also looked at Oliver and Renly with a composed face. That's true. There are no taxis around here, and I wonder if there's even a decent hotel. Now that we're done here, please leave immediately. Oliver and Renly were ushered out like they were being chased away. They probably couldn't believe the last train left so early. Their hurried figures were visible from the second-floor balcony as they headed to the station. Watching their flustered departure, the weight in my heart dissipated. Some cleanup remained, but it felt like it was over. Missing the last train, Oliver and Renly couldn't find a taxi and ended up walking about an hour to a hotel. The next day, they managed to salvage only their clothes from the house, which was undergoing demolition. Actually, the contents of the house, including furniture, appliances, and my belongings, were temporarily stored in a warehouse, but I didn't tell Oliver and Renly. Later, the lawyer informed me that the divorce was finalized, including the settlement for compensation from the divorce court. Oliver was reluctant to pay, but pressure was applied to his company, and he agreed to the payment. Based on the detective's report, Oliver was fired for embezzlement. Renly, involved in a police case, was expelled from high school, let alone going to university. Jobless Oliver could only rent an old, cramped apartment far from the station. There he lived with Renly, who had dropped out of high school. Renly shifted all the blame to Oliver, and they constantly fought, as the detective reported. Having quit my part-time job at the real estate, I was contemplating my next move. When Anthony suggested I help with the family business and employed me in his resort property management company. The resort setting is a big change from city life, surrounded by nature, providing a refreshing change of scenery. I also started keeping a dog, so I don't feel lonely living alone. For now, this dog is all the family I need. I'm planning to live leisurely, just me and my dog.